On today's episode of making fun of YouTubers that are small but have still more subscribers and viewers than I do, we're looking at a video that is going to talk about why new games and gaming nowadays sucks so bad and why old games are so good. Now, before we get into this video, it's important to know a couple things. I'm like so anti corporations and anti all the people that make video games nowadays. It's insane. I love video games so much. I hate the people that make them. I hate everybody. Tekken is one of my favorite games ever made. Bandai Namco could go to hell and burn for all eternity, and I would be better off as a person. But I love Tekken so much. But they hate me. So why should I like them? This isn't me being an apologist for modern gaming. I'm not like defending modern gaming. However, it is important that if we're going to make some like really big bold claims, that we actually analyze what's going on today and why we're saying what we're saying. And this is why I like talking about YouTubers that aren't actually that big, because they say a bunch of stuff and they never get to the point, and that's what we're going to see in just a second. This video is called Playing Older Games Made Me Realize How Bad Modern Gaming is. I'm losing my mind. So this guy went back and he played these old games and he was like, dude, these are so much better than the new games. Man, I love games. I don't remember if I talked about it in a recent video too, but there's a lot of people that are online talking about burnout in gaming and just like gaming just doesn't feel the way that it used to anymore. And I don't remember if I've talked about it before, but a lot of people have this sentiment, and then they go back and play older games and they're like, oh wait, no, new games are just not very good. Yeah, but then also I've had the opposite experience where I just play more games. I play new and old games, and I'm like, all these games are awesome, and nobody knows what they're talking about except for me. I'm the only smart person alive.
They don't make games like they used to anymore. If that wasn't true, you wouldn't see so many remasters being made.
I hate to stop the video like right here at the beginning, but they don't make games like they used to anymore, which is why they keep making the old games that they used to make. Like, what? What are you talking about? He's got like Dead Space put up there, and I've been playing through the Dead Space remake recently, and it's like it's not a one-to-one remake, but it's very much like they're making this game the way that they used to make the game because that's the way that people want to play the game. I don't think that these two really, like, this doesn't support your point very much. What are you talking about?
I've gotten to the point where I don't even get excited for new games anymore. 9 times out of 10, I'm reaching for an older game or even a retro game. And it's not just me. So many people are buying older consoles and getting back into collecting games, and emulation has absolutely exploded in popularity. I mean, think of it. When the Steam Deck released, it didn't become popular because it could run PC games. Everybody, including myself, rushed out and bought one because of its ability to play older games.
The Steam Deck was not a success because it can play games. It's a success because it can emulate games. That's the only thing that people do on their Steam Deck. They don't even play any. That's the only thing that people do on their Steam Deck is just emulate games, which is why it has the horsepower of a gaming PC so that it can play a Nintendo 64 game in the palm of your hand, when you can just do that on your phone already. You don't need a Steam Deck to do that. If you waited until you had a Steam Deck to start emulating games, what are you doing?
2024 has to be the best year I've ever had enjoying games.
That's good for you.
At the same time, this has to be the first year I've bought the fewest amount of new games. I honestly...
That statement, that maybe say that in your head again, and then let's come back to that one later.
honestly thought that the recent new indie game, Squirrel with a Gun, was the only new game I purchased this year. That's because I totally forgot about Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. I thought that came out late last year, but it actually came out in January, so 2 new games? Going back and playing the games I missed out on has been the bulk of 2024 for me. Honestly, I feel like this is the year of the backlog. So it doesn't necessarily need to be retro games, it just happens to be the games I reach for the most. Sure, I want to play newer games like Black Myth Wukong. As a fan of Dark Souls and Sekiro, This game seems right up my alley. But I still haven't beaten Dark Souls 2. I loved Fallen Order, and I wanted to eventually play Jedi Survivor. I bought Mortal Shell on sale for like $5, and I haven't even touched that one yet. And when I finally do have the time to get good again, I feel like Elden Ring's gonna be my first priority when it comes to clearing my backlog. Then when all those games are finished, I probably want to play Lies of P. I went back and played Luigi's Mansion 1 and 2, and I practically marathoned the Final Fantasy series in preparation for the 7 remakes because I'm just that type of person.
You might want to like go back and watch everything that he just said again, but everything that I don't understand what he actually made this video about. I don't know if he actually wanted to talk about what he titled the video when he hit record, because everything that he just said didn't make any sense when you put it into the context of the video. A lot of the time when I'm talking about these smaller YouTubers, I'm not talking about, if you haven't like watched any of my videos before, I'm not here to talk about new or old games. I'm really mainly here to critique his writing. I'm an English teacher, and I think that he's not making very many good points here. And I think it's important to make good points. And I think it's important that, like, if we're going to take this time on the internet to express ourselves and to really, like, say something and have an opinion that these corporations are then going to consume and then put into their brains so that they can try and put out something that we're going to buy, it's important that we communicate what we want clearly. And it's important that if we're going to do that, we know what we want. And a lot of these smaller YouTubers that are getting on here to tell everybody what they think, they don't actually know what they think, and they don't know how to tell people what they think. Everything that he was just talking about, he was like, yeah, there's all these new games that I want to play, but I'm just playing old games. And yeah, I haven't even played these new games that I'm going to get around to eventually. Eventually I'll get around to these new games. They're so bad though, I haven't played them, but I've been playing all these old games though. Like I played all the I want to play Elden Ring and I want to play Black Myth Wukong because those are newer games and they look awesome. And I also am playing all the Final Fantasy games so that I can get ready for the Final Fantasy VII remakes, which are also newer games and I think they look awesome and I'm going to play them. Like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about right now? We're halfway through the video. No, we're about a third way through the video. And you haven't actually told me why new games are bad. You just told me you haven't been playing new games because you've been playing the old games. But that you still, what's going on?
Now, I'm most likely in the minority, but for some reason I feel like realistic graphics are less immersive. For the longest time, I felt like it was because newer games were kinda style over substance, meaning they looked pretty, but the gameplay wasn't a focus during development. To some extent that's true. When I play a hyper-realistic game, everything kind of becomes this visual static, to the point where I don't even know what parts of the environment I can interact with. It's the reason why you see things like the infamous yellow paint splattered everywhere to help guide you.
What he says about graphics too I think is pretty valid. Graphics in the olden days used to look really, really good, and now graphics today look really. What games are you playing, man? There are so many games where, yes, you are being guided by yellow paint, and I don't think that's a bad thing to be guided by something in the game. Like, that's not a bad idea to tell the players where they can go. Does it take you out of the game? Maybe it does, but I think it takes you out of the game less than, like, walking around in circles would. Like, that's just gonna break your immersion. When I played the first Uncharted game, I was just walking around trying to find whatever I could climb and find out where I was supposed to go. And that broke my immersion countless times. But then in a lot of new games, it's like, yeah, you just go this way. We don't really have to make you guess where you're supposed to go, because that's going to break your immersion a lot more. Because immersion isn't about thinking that it's real, it's just about getting sucked into it.
The biggest reason, and this is the most important one, why I seem to always go back to older games is just that they feel like they were made by people who love playing video games. Whatever happened to games designed to be played for fun rather than to be bought and consumed as a product? Microtransactions are now macrotransactions. Remasters prey on your nostalgia, and more often than not, they butcher the source material. And when I see games like Dragon Quest III HD 2D, a game that I haven't stopped thinking about since that first teaser trailer, having the original artwork censored for the modern audience, I bet you know who that is. By principle, I cannot support this. We're talking about Akira Toriyama's original art. This is the man that made every single kid at some point in their lives want to be Goku when they grow up. I was in the backyard with my cousins back then having imaginary beam struggles. And when I found out about his passing, I literally had whole ass tears rolling down my face. People are quick to clap back and say people like me are chuds or whatever the hell they say these days. It seems like every time I turn around there's a new buzzword being circulated after the last one loses its meaning. At the end of the day, I just want to play video games that feel like it was made by people like us. The kids that grew up with controllers in their hands, who got yelled at for sitting too close to the TV and told that it'll ruin their eyes. The kids that were trading Pokemon during recess with their link cables. Yelling random slurs at each other in Halo 3 matchmaking lobbies. Seriously, how the hell did we get here?
Did you notice how he started talking about modern gaming and its flaws for like half a second? And then started talking about Dragon Ball out of nowhere. And then he started talking about modern slang. It's not a bad idea to like kind of script out your videos and try and, like have them go around somewhere. I explained this to a substitute teacher that I had in high school one time. Because he would get in and he would have like an idea of what he wanted to talk about for a little bit just to inspire the class. But then he would go on for the entire class period and he would just ramble on about Puerto Rico. And I was like, look, man, I drew it up for him on the board too. And he was really receptive. He was a nice guy. Look, your point is right here. And you want to orbit your point so that you can cover all this ground. But you start with your point and then you go. And you keep going. And now all of a sudden your point is nowhere to be found. And I realized that I just did that by talking about my substitute teacher in high school, and he kept talking about Puerto Rico. And I am bad too, but you know what? I don't really care.
While the AAA space continues to fold in on itself, I know people like me will be perfectly fine clearing out our backlogs and playing some good old retro games.
Getting 8 ads every 20 minutes is actually diabolical. Meet Pi, the ad blocker that actually works on Twitch. Every user's dream. I can
dude!
gamers without being bombarded
Finally!
with ads in 20 minutes. It's seriously been
Thank goodness! The moral of the story is that are new games bad? Yes. Old games are pretty bad too. We're talking about all these old games. Everyone is stupid except for me. I'm the only smart person on the planet. When you make a blatant statement and you just say games were better back in the day, you don't mean that. You mean look at all these classic games that we used to have and now look at what we have now. Games come out a lot slower, and it's true that games are a lot more censored and a lot more user-friendly and a lot more just they're not very profound or boundary pushing. Back in the day though, there were so many bad games that came out right alongside all these good games. If you talk about like all of your awesome retro games, but then you also compare it to all the games that used to come out, like there's still a lot of awful games that came out way back in the day. There were a lot of lazy games. There were a lot of bad games. There were a lot of generic games. There were a lot of censored games. Yeah, there's these memorable ones, but that doesn't prove that all retro games are awesome. There are still good games that are coming out. There are still good games that aren't missing the point. There are still a lot of indie games that are being made by the people that grew up with controllers in their hands. Like there's still a lot going on here. You only like this guy barely addressed the main issue with modern gaming, which is financing it and where's the money coming from, because back in the day money came from video game sales, but nowadays the money comes from video game sales and microtransactions and macrotransactions and DLC and live service games. But how can you make a live service game? Concord proved that you can't do it. Helldivers 2 proves that you still can do it, that they can survive. So like, what even is anything anymore? There weren't a lot of live service games back in the day. They existed, like World of Warcraft existed, but now the issue is just that developers are trying to find out, how do we make money off of video games? And then there's the issue with graphics. He brought up a really good point with graphics, and I talked about it a little bit, but in this context of like money, people are spending so much time and money, developers are spending so much time and money on video games to the point where games take so long to make. So in order to actually break even, they have to make even more money than they did back in the day. Like on the Atari 2600, one dude could make a game. One dude made Yar's Revenge on the Atari 2600, and that game slaps. That game is awesome. Like, you could just have like a couple people sit down over a week and be like, let's make a video game, guys. Why? That's what led to the crash. The same guy that made Yar's Revenge made A.T. and destroyed the entire video game industry. Bye-bye, video games. Now, it takes thousands of people, thousands of hours to then make a video game that sucks and won't make any money. There's an issue here. Obviously, companies aren't really doing a lot to progress towards a resolution. There's a lot of indie developers who are doing a lot to progress towards a resolution. A lot of people don't understand that there's that kind of an issue. There's a lot of other issues. I'm like beating around like so many bushes here. There's so much stuff to be said about this topic. The main thing that I actually wanted to say, though, getting back to the actual point of my video, is that you can make a video on the internet, but just make sure that when you make it, that you say what you're meaning to say, and you don't just ramble on about nothingness for 20 minutes like I do. Don't make videos like me. I'm a bad person.